How can dance be used as worship? Find out next on the Christian Arts and Entertainment Podcast. Welcome again to the Christian Arts and Entertainment Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Newsom. Thank you for joining us, whether you're joining us via YouTube or via your favorite podcast app. You are very welcome. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I have here with me today my guest, Ari Dickinson, ballet instructor extraordinaire, and she is going to join us here and talk a little bit about dance and about using dance as a form of worship. Thank you, Miss Ari, once again for agreeing to come and talk to us.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So just to get started, tell us and the watchers, viewers, listeners, a little bit about yourself and about your dance background.
Well, I was brought up in a artistic family and trained for classical ballet from an early age. I had scholarships to places like San Francisco Ballet and the School of American Ballet in New York, and I danced professionally when I was a teenager with the San Diego Ballet in California. And then when I was, I guess, about 16 or 17, I had a lot of injuries. And I began teaching at that point and I was studying music, and I ended up going to college and getting a church music degree. And then I just kept teaching and came with my husband here to South Carolina.
So where are you originally from?
Well, I was born in California, in Southern California. My dad was there doing he was a physician, and he was doing his time in the public health service in Southern California.
So South Carolina must be a big change for you then.
Well, my family actually lived in the country a lot wherever we were. In California, we lived in Virginia, usually in fairly rural areas. So this is not, being here in the Midlands is not too different.
Right. So in addition to being a ballet instructor, dance instructor, you and your husband both work together as worship leaders. Is that correct?
We're the music directors at Bethesda Presbyterian Church in Camden. We do the choirs and the music together.
Perfect. Well, and that's why I wanted to have you on, just to talk about how Christians and churches can engage in the world of dance, because it's an art form that, well, traditionally, historically, has seen a lot of liberal influence. I mean, we hear about famously, you read in music history and dance history about Tchaikovsky and being homosexual and things like that. So how do Christians who want to be career dancers, how do they engage in this world properly?
Well, I think it's really important to go back to a more fundamental question, which is, what do we do with any of the gifts that we are given? I think you can look at Adam and Eve and you can know that they had been given tremendous gifts of all kinds, one of which was free will, which they misused when they made the wrong choice and decided not to honor God. Everything that we have, from the gifts of communication, words, singing, our bodies, the relationships that we have with other people, all of those things are gifts. All of them can be used and honored in ways that are pleasing to God. and that glorify him. And all of those things can also be misused. I think words are a good example. The Bible tells us that we can either give life or death with our words. We have a choice, and we should be aware of that. Um, every gift has that possibility, and I think the human body and the the gift of dance are no different. Um, right now, particularly in our culture, the performing arts in general have been co-opted for very secular uses, and there are a lot of songs with ugly lyrics
Oh, yes.
and dark lyrics and promiscuous lyrics, all that kind of thing. And the dances that generally go with that in our culture are in keeping with what the songs are about. I think people need to go back to the scriptures. They need to understand that dancing in the scriptures is a very important thing. It's shown in the Old Testament and the New Testament as both a positive and a negative thing. And once again, it's our responsibility how we use it.
Right. So how would you advise parents to prepare their children, especially the teenagers that show an aptitude, show a gift for it, and they want to try to pursue that career like you did? How do parents prepare them for what they're going to get into?
Well, one important thing is to have the attitude in life that Christians actually can go into any field. The Judeo-Christian tradition is that everything that we do is, in a sense, sacred to God. All the work that we do, whether we're digging a ditch or singing a song or
Right.
painting a picture, can be glorious if we do it well, as it says in the New Testament. Whatever you do, you should do with all your heart, as if you were doing it for the Lord. And I think if a young person is brought up with that point of view, they can go to Hollywood and be in films. We know that there are Christian people in movies and Christian movie directors and actors and actresses. It is difficult right now from a cultural standpoint. A lot of times Christians feel alone in some of those settings, but there's no reason why a gifted young person can't become a dancer and glorify God with their hard work, their dedication, and the beauty of what they do. I think one area of discernment is the styles of music and the
Right.
styles of dance. Some dance traditions were used for storytelling, and I teach classical ballet. That tradition began with storytelling and entertainment for kings and things. A lot of it is very beautiful. Obviously, it can be used in ways that are not beautiful, but I think anything that we do that is beautiful glorifies God. I think a young person would need to have a strong church that they belong to in whatever city they went to dance,
Hmm.
a community of other Christians to encourage them. They would have to be, like an actor would have to be, strong in saying, there are some things that I will not do
Right.
in a performance or a film or, with my body. But it's very important to remember, I mean, we are commanded in the Psalms, like in Psalm 149 and 150, to dance and sing and praise the Lord. Those Psalms tell us how we are supposed to react with joy to God, and one of the ways is with dancing. So I believe that it brings him pleasure when his people, whether individually or corporately, use song and dance to glorify him, to praise him.
Hmm.
It's it has to be done with the right heart.
Right. You mentioned different styles of dance and everything, and it's a good place to bring up the show Cuties,
Yeah,
which has come under a lot of scrutiny for over sexualization of the child pop, like modern dance type of scene, and that's a culture that's out there. There is a dance culture out there that pushes
right.
this, and we see it in cheerleading, we see it in our high school dance teams, we see this style everywhere. So our young girls are getting bombarded with this is a popular way to dance. If you want to be a dancer, then you need to be in this world. So how would you advise families and parents to approach this type of dance?
Well, I would say first of all the attitude of the heart is the most important thing, but also to point out to young girls and boys too, that the styles of dance that are mostly used now commercially are frequently bringing attention to, exaggerating the hips, the chest, the thrusting movements, and things which are provocative, suggestive of sexual enticement and activity. Those things are supposed to be used to honor God also, all those activities, all those parts of the body. They are not to be flaunted or advertised, you know? And I think that it's so exaggerated now that, like you say, that people are just bombarded with it, that sometimes they don't even realize when they're watching the teenagers that that's what's happening, and that young girls are being taught to flaunt and show off those movements and parts of their body. I think the parents need to be very aware of that. They just need to point it out in the same way that you would point out a person speeding or racing in cars, as you don't do that when you drive. That's
Right.
irresponsible. That you respect yourself and your own body, but you also respect other people. Like you're not trying to you mustn't try to be tempting to people or to lead men, for example, to have evil thoughts. That's very wicked, to be a person who does that to others. So I think this is an issue also about the body, about how the body is a wonderful gift and it's beautiful, and people in marriage share that gift with each other, and it's sacred, it's blessed, it's wonderful. But outside of that, it is not, and it's very hard in our culture to keep that in focus. But it's just like all the other gifts that we have. Our gift right now, you can see, for example, all across our culture, people abusing and misusing the gift of freedom
Right.
to do destructive things. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing with any art form. Any art form can be used. Think of paintings that have been used in the past by authoritarian regimes. They paid the artist to promote something that was against freedom, against God, against the conscience of the people that were in subjection. Any art form can be misused. Right now, the music and dance is, in our faces with just egregious, outrageous behavior and words, and sort of trying to shock. I mean, there's a
Right.
lot of attempt to try to shock. I think the emphasis needs to be on worship in the church setting, and on beauty and edification in a secular setting.
Okay. Well, that's great. Let's talk about moving into the conversation about dance used in church and dance used in worship. So,
Yes.
you've mentioned obviously the Bible does talk about dance. Famously, David danced before the Ark of the Covenant.
Right,
Dance
right.
is listed in the Psalms and such. But what is the historical significance, the historical impact of dance to the church specifically?
Um, if you're thinking of the New Testament church, or
And beyond, and
yes,
on up to modern time, what's been the connection to dance in the church over the years?
well, I think we have lost a lot of the sense of joy and celebration, and using our entire selves to rejoice before God and to thank Him for our salvation, and the beautiful creation that He's made, and all the things that we have that are in our lives that are wonderful. I think because the secular culture often has examples of dance as a questionable, suggestive activity, churches, through history, like Reformed churches, Baptist churches, have kind of shied away from things like that, which they felt might give people feelings that are not particularly holy.
Yeah, I mean, they made a whole movie about it. They made it twice. Footloose,
Yeah.
they've made the
So
movie twice.
yeah. So I think, at the dance place, we have liturgical dance teams that are different levels of dancers, different ages, who have gone out and danced in a lot of churches and at Christian conferences. Those groups spend a lot of time in prayer. We use music that is Christian and has Christian words. One of the things that we have emphasized as different teachers, we're all choreographed and worked with those groups. We've emphasized sort of illuminating the words with the dance for the congregation to help them possibly hear the words in a new way, or in a more profound way, understand some of the words of the songs and what they might mean to an individual, to a person before the Lord. We also, have used dances in a celebratory way. Often in the Bible, dance is contrasted with mourning, as if it were the
Right.
opposite of mourning is
Right.
dancing,
Yes.
right? So if you're really joyful and you're really coming before the Lord with joy and dancing, that is totally appropriate, and there's nothing wrong with it. I think in the church, it's important to be sure that the dancers have, modest outfits, that they're not calling attention to any parts of their body. Just, it's the movement, it's the meaning, it's the joy, and it's the heart of the dancer. Congregations can be led to worship very deeply by through movement. I have friends who lead dance teams that worship in both Jewish and Christian settings. And I think it's something that the churches don't need to be afraid of, but I completely understand the reaction in times like this, that there's a fear that dancing in a church will somehow cross over a line and not
Right.
honor God. And I completely understand that. It has to be well and beautifully done, I think.
And a lot of times when you get kids on stage and dancing, they become the center of attention. They become the center of their focus, and it becomes a performance per se. So one of the questions, that I get asked is about dance is how do you make it not a performance where people are focusing on what the dancers are doing, and make it more about worship. So how do we take that look at me, look at what I'm doing attitude, not only out of the dancers but also out of the people who are watching? How do we deal with that?
Well, one thing that has to be, the leadership has to from day one have prayer and worship as a focus of even the rehearsals. The young people, the ones who come into our liturgical dance teams are very, very genuine and very much doing this from their heart. But it's even like what we do with our children's choirs. We always teach them, even the ones who are like 5, 6, 7, that age. When we're in church, we're not up there so that our grandparents can say how cute we are.
Right.
We're not up there so our parents will be proud of us. We are up there to share the songs we've learned and give them to God as an offering of our gifts. Like, we're using gifts that He gave us, we're offering them back to Him. And in the process, we hope and pray that the people in the congregation are drawn to worship more fully and more completely. Certainly for a dancer, I can speak from my own experience. Dancing in a worship setting, being able to use your whole self, your body, your mind, your soul, the whole person, is incredibly joyful and profound, because that is who we are. We express ourselves often through our dance, through our movement. And to have to stand still and to not be able to move is actually, in a way, difficult for a dancer and seems incomplete. Now, when a congregation sees a dancer worshiping from the heart in a way that goes with the music or the lyrics particularly, and makes those words even more clear and more rich, the congregation will be led to a spirit of worship in the same way that can happen when a singer sings from their heart.
Right.
One thing that I like to mention is the way that a person who is a interpreter for the deaf uses movements, sign language, to make any kind of speech or a sermon, for example, accessible to people who can't hear. If you watch that and you're a hearing person, you see in their movements and the things that they do with their hands and arms, you see aspects of the words that you had never thought of. Because if you don't know sign language, there's like an element of surprise, in a way, of, oh, is that the sign for the Lord? That reminds me of His hands, with the nail holes.
Yes.
And when you see sign language beautifully done, it enriches your experience, even if you're a hearing person.
Right.
And that is true actually in secular settings too. So just remarkable things like when there's a hurricane coming or something, you see this person over here working so hard and expressing these things so beautifully. And I think in church, we can think of, like, a lot of times children's choirs use small portions of their song. They will do like the refrain, they will do it in sign language while
Right.
they sing it. That's like a really good starting point for thinking about dance as a ministry, is to think about how those kind of movements enhance and enrich the worship of the people who see them, and also those who are doing them. And dance just takes it a little bit further, right? And
Right.
especially if you have trained dancers, um, you're going beyond the verbal to a meaning that covers the whole person. And I think when that is being done by dancers from their hearts, there's really not much danger of the congregation thinking that it's just a performance. They're going to be drawn to feelings of worship also.
Right. So a lot of churches have been so staunchly against dance, and I think of the more conservative, reserved
Yeah.
denominations, the Southern Baptists, the Presbyterians. You get your more charismatic denominations; they're a little more open to it.
Yes.
Um, but I've seen multiple churches who have bylaws
Right.
written into the bylaws of the church that there will be no dance whatsoever, even though the Bible clearly expresses that dance is a legitimate form of worship. So we're beginning to see a lot of churches starting to reconsider this type of thing. So what steps? You mentioned the children using sign language, but beyond that, what steps does leadership need to take to sort of begin reclaiming dance as a form of worship in their churches?
Well, I think one thing that is helpful is to have an outside group that you've seen or respected as a leader in the church, that is worshipful. You have an idea of their costuming or garments. You know that those are going to be appropriate. To have them come and do something outside of a worship service, for example, in a family night supper, in a vacation Bible school setting. Our dancers a year or so ago danced at live nativity at night, at Christmas time, outdoors. Settings like that are often more comfortable for congregations that are not used to dance as a Christian activity.
Right.
And they can become more open to it in those settings where they do not feel as constricted by the fact that they're sitting in a pew, that this is worship like their mother and their grandmother and great grandmother did, and something different is happening in their sanctuary. I think that those kind of settings make it easier, and people frequently are surprised at how deeply they respond to the worshipfulness of the dance, at a family night supper or some other
Right.
setting like that, just as you would if you invited me to come and sing solo Christian music. And it could be outside the worship setting, but if I were singing songs that are worshipful, like the Lord's Prayer or Amazing Grace or something like that, you would feel that worship happening. And I think some church traditions are also trying to integrate some forms of dance into services.
Well, they already are with Bible school.
Right. But
It
and
seems like
sometimes
we
some
give
of
we
the
give Bible.
Bible school are a little crazy, but they do that to help the children be fully involved and make them part of it. I've seen services where they included the dancers in a practical, functional way, as in Bringing in the elements of the communion,
Mm-hmm.
coming down the aisles, bringing in the communion, music playing, but not up in front necessarily doing a whole song.
Right.
Palm Sunday, dancers with palms in their hands, going up and down the aisles and around the congregation. Also, in some traditions, they do things where they dip like the palms in water or something and sprinkle the people as they go by. And there are different things like that where dance can be incorporated very successfully and very appropriately as part of the liturgy. And I do want to reiterate that I think it's a great loss that Christians need to reclaim these art forms and say they're ours, as they're God's. This belongs to God, and not just give up and have the secular culture totally take over that area.
Right. I like to tell everybody that, as Christians, we are the only people on the planet who have the right to be the most creative artists on the planet, because our God created these things, and they're His. And so we have the right to be the best at them. And we should not let the world take control of all of those.
Well, if we truly are thinking about human beings as made in the image of God, one of His strong characteristics is creativity.
Right.
So, but if we're made in His image, then it is appropriate. It is almost necessary to our life that in order to be fully who we're supposed to be, we should be creative.
I agree.
And to shut that off is a loss of some aspect of our humanity that limits us and hurts the culture in general. To just shut the door and say that part of our humanness isn't going to be included. That's not healthy.
That's exactly right, and I completely agree. Miss Ari, we are about out of time. Do you have any last words about dance and worship you'd like to share?
I would like to encourage people to use movement and dance, any kind of movement, when they are praying and worshiping alone at home or in their office or whatever. Don't be afraid to get up and move your arms, to move to the rhythm of the music and to offer yourself to God with motion and with joy. Many people, when they do their devotional time, they'll listen to hymns or they listen to contemporary Christian songs that have a lot of meaning in their lyrics. And I would encourage people to include dance, not dance per se, like you don't have to be a trained dancer, but just natural movement to worship and praise God just on your own, because that's there and it will strengthen and deepen your prayer time.
Thank you, Miss Ari Dickinson, ballet instructor in South Carolina. Thank you for joining us, and thank you all for watching or listening on your podcast. I hope that you found this episode informative, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you.
This has been the Christian Arts and Entertainment Podcast with author, musician, and worship pastor Kevin Newsom. Thank you for joining us today, for your comments, and for subscribing. See you next time.